Ms. Kiley?
Ready?
Yep.
Okay, so my report is different this year too because we're looking at a different indicator than we have in the past. So I just made a note to note that as we progress, I'll be adding graduating classes to this data. This is the first one, so that's why it's just the class of 2020. So what you're looking at, there's 4 figures that I put down here to try to capture this data. What you're looking at is the students who we tested PSAT entrance exam to SAT. So we're looking at a particular cohort of the graduating class of 2020, and that is the students that have been with us through the 4 years that they've been there. Because we're tracking growth, we want to be able to track what we have done, and there's so many factors that factor into that if we don't have 2 tests for those students. So that's why I've adjusted the numbers a little bit, and you can see that we're talking about a number based on 320 right now because of the graduating class of 2020. That's the number of students that we had both of those test scores for. So when we look at just benchmarks of those students that we have been able to track within our cohort being with us from entrance exam to junior year, on that ERW benchmark, 242 or 76% of those test takers met the benchmark, and in math we're looking at 203 or 63% of the students met the benchmark, and I added the benchmark there for your reference so that you can see what we're talking about. That's a slightly higher benchmark in mathematics than it is in ERW. What I did then was I took the number of students who did not meet that benchmark, and I looked at how many of those particular students, even though they didn't meet benchmark, did they meet their expected growth from PSAT 8 to SAT. And so that's what figure 2 represents. So of the students who did not meet in ERW, 14% of those students we were able to get through their expected growth, and in math, slightly higher with 22% of the students who didn't meet, we were able to get them to their expected growth. So what that takes me to is kind of the combination of figure 1 and figure 2, which is in figure 3. This is really the performance indicator. So of the number of students that we have had from the class of 2020 from PSAT 8 to SAT, 79% or 253 of those students either met ERW benchmark or their expected growth. And then in mathematics, 72% or 229 students out of the 320 met their math benchmark and or their expected growth in mathematics. So then ultimately this all brings me to figure 4, which is how we move forward from here, looking at the number and the percentage of students who did not meet their benchmark and did not meet their growth. So this gives us 21% in English and 28% in mathematics, knowing that those are the kids that we have to bring up. Those are the kids that we were not able to get either to benchmark or to growth. And so when we look at that population, we look at the action steps below. One of the really great things for me when looking at this data, because this data does show me that we have some work to do, the great things for me is that we have Bridget Watson as our CAP coordinator. For those of you who don't know Bridget Watson, she is a certified English teacher who is a hair away from being a certified math teacher as well. In fact, she was going to get emergency certified in math from West 40 before the shutdown happened in March. As the CAP coordinator, Bridget has been doing test prep and analysis of the ACT and SAT for years. She is responsible for many students in our community bringing those scores up, as well as students in our building. So she and I are working on how do we systematically support the building as a whole. Dr. Freitas is very passionate about wanting to make sure that as an entire building, we are doing certain things together as a whole building so that students are getting exposure to SAT skills, not just in math and English, but in all of our courses. And Bridget is going to be integral in working with me to create some of those materials so that students can do some SAT skill building through, let's say, a social studies class, but our social studies teachers can focus on the social studies, and Bridget can support bringing in how do we do that and how do we robustly build those skills in those other areas. So that is probably our main step toward how are we really going to push this in the right direction. And then I listed some other steps that we take there. We weren't able to continue with our RB prep at the end of last year like we normally do. We get some seniors who oftentimes retest, and then that changes their scores a little bit. But that was all changed due to COVID because we weren't able to do that. We did, however, for those seniors, even though it wouldn't affect the data that I'm reporting on, we wanted to be able to send those seniors off with some more support as they get ready to take their tests and prepare for their next step. So we were able to offer remote sessions that Bridget was able to lead this year so that our students could get that additional support since last year was just such a strange year. And again, as we move forward, I will add different cohorts to this data so you can see how different classes stack up against one another.
Kylie, what's our gap in data going to be now because of COVID? So you reported out on this year, so that means
that's a big question.
Well, the seniors that you're reporting out on,
yes,
these are the students that graduated in May.
Yeah, there shouldn't be a gap in data. There's just a little bit of a delay because our current seniors now, the class of 2021, was able to test on the SAT school day that we did in October. Yes. So in 6 to 8 weeks, we'll get those data results. So at this time next year, when I'm ready to report on 2021, we'll have that data.
So let's say we continue to do this. The freshmen, whether this is your question or Beth's question, this was taken from their PSAT 8, which they took as an 8th grader coming in as their placement test.
Yes.
So this year, we already know we can't bring that many students in to do the placement test. We're going to use their MAP scores and for placement assignments. So this incoming freshman class, which would be what, Beth? Class of
2025.
Mm-hmm.
So that will be the 1 year we'll have a gap because they won't have a PSAT 8, but hopefully we'll be able to do the
yes.
PSAT 9
right.
in the spring next year.
And there's a gap for the current sophomores because they didn't take a PSAT 9, and there's a gap for our current juniors because they didn't take a PSAT 10. So the state only had us test our our seniors this month.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't have data for the current sophomores.
So the 90
juniors.
points of growth is not from their 8th grade entrance exam till their senior year. It's 90 points over from their 8th grade and how they grew as a freshman on the PSAT 9, PSAT 10, right? So that's a cumulative growth over there.
Yeah, you can do expected growth. Really, SAT does it from year to year even. So what you would do if let's say with our incoming freshman class of 2025 not taking an entrance exam, we would just look at what their expected growth from their freshman year to their junior year would be. Because SAT gives you expected growth for every single year. So you can look at it that way. We would just be adjusting the data a little bit for whatever test we have to see how much they were able to grow in the time that we had them.
So our current freshmen have a PSAT 8 on the record. Mm-hmm. They'll need a PSAT 9. Depending on where we're at with COVID in the spring, possibility, maybe not a possibility.
Correct.
To be determined, right?
To be determined, correct.
Okay.
I will share one piece of good news of all of our seniors. Today was the makeup day. We have only 4 seniors that were not tested for the SAT that we'll have to test in the spring. That's pretty incredible.
And that's a graduation requirement.
Yes. It is, but the students could take it in the spring along with the juniors, and our concern was that we were going to be testing our entire junior class and then still having to maybe worry about, I don't know. I mean, I was honestly anticipating, 100 kids. So
4 is a great number. Sure.
Yeah, it worked out really well.
Great.
Can I ask, is there I would assume there's a recognition that the SAT scores from the seniors that just took it might not be what we would normally expect it to be? Is there that, I mean, I'm just from my parental perspective of my
Sure.
son, right, who stopped schooling essentially in March. And while he's taking part in online learning, he even said to me, like, Mom, I don't feel very prepared. Like, you know, don't be mad if I don't do well. And I'm like, absolutely, like, what it is, like, most colleges aren't even taking SAT scores this year.
Right.
So I just, like, is that a conversation you guys have, or the school has had? Because it kind of worries me that, like, if this is one of our benchmarks, you know, we might miss the mark next. I don't want to be defeatist by any means, but
Probably
that-
schools and as a whole.
I think so.
probably see a
I think it's not, I see what you're saying. I don't know that it's defeatist. I think it's being a realist at this point.
Yeah.
And we're, you know, we're not unique in that way.
No.
Every school, every student, you know, that's sort of the, you know, when people talk about the gaps that appear because of COVID-19 and
right, like, this might be one of them.
Yeah.
this might be one. And there are gaps everywhere. It's not that COVID-19 just hit our school, it's every person is experiencing that. So it levels the playing field in some weird, sick way, right? But we have to take that into consideration because there's certainly in the fourth quarter, we have lots of courses that are still building content and skills in that fourth quarter.
Yep.
And our teachers were not able to do certain things in fourth quarter because of the guidance of the state. So that's certainly something that we're gonna have to just keep in the back of our minds and make a part of our conversation, understanding that this is, again, the most unique of years.
Thanks.
And just to add to all the parents and board members out there, you know, I don't like guessing until I see the data, right? But students, what really counts in life is the work you do every day, right? Your grades, the work you turn in, the follow-up, the feedback you get and what you do with that feedback. If for some reason, you know, you get a score that is not what you expected, okay, concentrate on what you can do. Showing up right to school when you're designated to, doing your work, following up with your teacher, because GPA, right, and your coursework, it's a higher determinant in you getting into universities, right? As we've spoken before, many universities are making testing optional. I know we do it because it's a state requirement, and I want to do well. I want us to do well at the school on the SAT. But just remember that, you know, parents, you know, board members and students, it's great to do well on the test, but you're way more than that. Okay, remember that, please.
Kylie, while you're here, before we let you step off. Oh, I'm sorry, Laura.
Is there going to be, just listening to the radio and different reports over the week, will there be some national reports and how we all fall out? So that we can kind of compare our students with everyone else that they're going to be competing with?
I imagine College Board typically reports nationally on everything. When I log into my College Board portal, I can see how our students stack up nationally. So when we are able to get that data back from the October test that our current seniors just took,
Yeah.
there will be a state, how we line up at the state and how we line up as a total cohort nationally, yes.
Kylie, before you, is that it for the board questions?
So do we have this benchmark, do we have that for multiple years? We can see if
We have
it's
a-
trending up or trending down, or how does it?
This is the first year we implemented these.
Right,
goals.
we haven't
This
looked
board
at it this
implemented
way
these goals
before.
last year. So Kylie will be able to add trending reports for, you know,
Yeah.
historical.